Hi, Grade 4. Today you're going to be listening to part 1 of Chapter 14. This chapter is called The Way Out. The next day was song rehearsal day. Everyone was let off from work at 12 o'clock to practice for the singing. It was a slow morning for messages. Lena had a lot of time to sit at her station in Garden Square and think. She put her elbows on her knees, rested her chin in her hands, and stared down at the pavement in front of the bench, which was worn smooth by the many feet that had passed there. She thought about the mayor, down in his room full of plunder, gorging on peaches and asparagus and wrapping his huge body in elegant new clothes. She thought about his great stack of light bulbs and shook her head in bewilderment. What was he thinking? If he still had light bulbs when everyone else in Ember had run out, would he enjoy sitting in his lit room while the rest of the city drowned in darkness? And when the power finally ran out for good, all his light bulbs would be useless. Possessions couldn't save him. How could he have forgotten that? He must be thinking the same way as Looper. Everything was hopeless anyhow, so he'd live it up while he could. She leaned back against the bench, stretched her legs out, and took a long breath. Very soon, the guards would storm into the secret room and seize the mayor as he sat stuffing himself on stolen goodies. Maybe they already had. Maybe today the stunning news would come. Mayor arrested, stealing from citizens. Maybe they'd announce it at the singing so everyone could hear. No one came with any messages to be delivered, so after a while, Lena left her station and found a step to sit on in an alley off of Caluw Street. She pulled back her hair and braided it to keep it from sliding around. Then she took from her pocket the copy of the instructions she'd made just after she'd sent her note to the mayor. She unfolded it and began to study it. This is what she was doing when, a little before 12 o'clock, she looked up to see Doon running towards her. He must have come straight from the pipeworks. He had a big damp patch of water on one of his legs. He spoke in such an excited rush. "I've been looking all over for you. I've found it," he exclaimed. "Found what?" Lena asked. "The E. At least it looks like an E. It must be an E, though you wouldn't know it if you were just looking at it." "You mean the rock marked with E in the pipeworks?" "Yes, I found it." He stood breathing hard, his eyes blazing. "I'd seen it before, but I didn't think of it as an E then. Just as a squiggle that looked like writing." "There are all kinds of rocks that look like they're covered with writing." "Which rocks? Where are they?" Lena was on her feet now, bouncing with excitement. "Down at the west end of the river, near where it all goes into that great hole in the pipeworks wall." He paused, trying to catch his breath, and listen. "We could go there right now." "Right now?" "Yes, because of rehearsal. Everyone's going home, so the pipeworks will be closed and empty." "But if it's closed, how will we get in?" Grinning, Doon produced a large key from his pocket. "I ducked into the office on my way out and borrowed the spare key," he said. "Lister, he's the pipeworks director, was in the bathroom practicing his singing. He won't miss the key today. And tomorrow everyone will be off work." He did an impatient shuffle. "So come on now," he said. The town clock struck the first of its 12 noontime bells. Lena stuffed her copy of the instructions back in her pocket. "Let's go." The pipeworks was empty and silent. Lena and Doon went up the hallway past the rows of boots and the slickers hanging on their hooks. They didn't take any of them for themselves. This was not a pipeworks tunnel they were about to enter, they were sure. It wouldn't be dripping with water or lined with spurting pipes. They went down the long stairway and out into the main tunnel, where the river thundered alongside the path, its dark surface strewn with flecks of light. Doon led the way along the river's edge. As they neared the west end, Lena saw the rocky outcroppings Doon had described to her. They were strange bulging shapes, creased with lines like faces of very old... I'm going to repeat this. Doon led the way across the river's edge. As they neared the west end, Lena saw the rocky outcroppings Doon had described to her. They were strange bulging shapes, creased with lines like the faces of the very old. Not far beyond, Lena could see the place where the river disappeared into a great hole in the pipework's wall. Dune knelt down beside a clump of stones. He ran a finger over their convoluted surface. "Look here," he said. Lena stooped down and peered deeply at the curved lines. It was hard to see the E at first, because it was surrounded by such a tangle of other lines, and because she was expecting it to be an E drawn with straight strokes. But when she saw it, an E drawn with curving lines, a script E, she was sure it had been carved on purpose. It was centered on the stone, and its lines were deep and even. "So from here we should look down at the river," said Dune. "That's what the instructions said. Down riverbank to ledge." He lay on his stomach next to the rock and inched forward until his head hung over the edge of the path. Lena watched him anxiously. His elbows stuck up on either side of him, and his head bent down, was nearly invisible. He stayed that way for a few seconds. Then he shouted, "Yes, I see something!" and scrambled to his feet again. "You do it," he said. "Look at the riverbank below us." Lena did as he had. She laid down and put herself forward until her head was over the edge. 8 feet or so below her, she saw black water churning by. She tucked her chin in and looked at the riverbank. It was a sheer rock wall, straight up and down, and slick with spray. And at first, that was all she saw. But she kept looking, and before long she could make out short iron bars bolted to the bank, one below the next, almost directly below her. They were like rungs on a ladder. They were a ladder, she realized. The bars provided a way to climb down to the riverbank. Not a very appealing way. The bars looked slippery, and the water below was so terribly fast. And because of the dimness and the flying spray, she couldn't actually see if there was a ledge at the bottom or not. But the E was clearly an E, and the bars were clearly a ladder. This must be the right place. "Who will go first?" said Dune. "You can," Lena said, getting to her feet. "All right." Dune turned so that his back was at the river, and he eased himself carefully over the rocks, feeling for the first rung with his foot. Lena watched as he sank out of sight little by little. After a few moments, his voice called up from below, "I'm down. Now you come." Lena inched backward, just as Dune had, letting one foot dangle over the edge, lower and lower until it touched the first rung of the ladder. She shifted her weight to that foot, clinging with cold fingers to a ridge in the rock, and lowered herself slowly until she was standing on the rung with both feet. Her heart was beating so fast that she was afraid it would shake her fingers loose from their grip. Now she had to move downward. She felt for the next rung with her foot, found it, and let herself down. It would have been easy if it hadn't been for the river waiting below to swallow her. "You're almost there," called Dune. His voice came from right below her. "There's a ledge. One more rung and you'll feel it." She did feel it, solid beneath her foot. For a second, she stood there, still clutching the ladder. The surging water was only inches below her now. "Don't think about it," she told herself. She moved sideways, 2 steps to stand next to Dune, and there in front of them was a rectangular space carved out of the river wall, rather like the entry hall of a building. It was perhaps 8 feet wide and 8 feet high, and would have been invisible from anywhere else in the pipeworks. You had to have climbed down the riverbank to see it. They stepped into this entry hall and walked a few steps. Enough light to see came by the tunnels behind them. Lena stopped. "There's a door," she said. "What?" The water roared so loudly they had to shout to be heard. "The door!" Lena yelled happily. "Yes, I see it," cried Dune. At the end of the passage was a wide, solid-looking door. It was dull gray, with greenish and brownish blotches that looked like mildew. Lena put her palms against it. It was metal and felt cold. The door had a metal handle, and just below the handle was a keyhole. Lena reached into the pocket of her pants for the copy of the instructions. She unfolded it, and Dune looked over her shoulder. Together they squinted at the paper in the dim light from the main tunnel. "This is the part right here," she said, pointing. 3. I'll show you a picture of the message. Lena ran her finger along line number 3. This must say, something, something down riverbank to ledge approximately 8 feet below. That's what we've just done. And then 4 is something about backs to the water, find door, something. And then key behind, that must be key behind. And then there's a small steel pan. Do you see a small steel pan? Dune was studying the paper. It says, right. We should look at the right of the door. And quite easily they found it. It wasn't a pan at all, but a small square of steel embedded in the wall. A steel panel, said Lena. She ran her fingers across it and felt a dent at one side. When she pressed there, the panel sprang open easily and silently, as if it were glad to have been finally found. Inside, a silver key was hanging on a hook. Lena reached for it and then drew her hand back. Shall I do it, she said, or shall you? You do it, said Dune. So she took the key from its hook and put it in the keyhole. She turned it and felt a click. She grasped the door handle and pushed, but nothing happened. She pushed harder. It won't budge, she said. Maybe it opens outward, said Dune. Lena pulled the door. The door still didn't move. It has to open. We unlocked it. She pulled and pushed and hauled on the handle, and the door moved, not inward or outward, but sideways. Oh, this is how it goes. She pulled the handle to the left, and with a deep rasping sound, the door slid into a slot in the wall. Behind it, there is a space of utter darkness. And that's where we're going to stop for today. On a cliffhanger.